Andrew Carnegie's story is often hailed as the ultimate American success tale, the young Scottish immigrant who, through grit and determination, became one of the wealthiest men in the world. But beneath this glamorous rags-to-riches narrative lies a darker tale of ruthless ambition, relentless exploitation, and brutal suppression of worker rights. This is the story of how Carnegie's relentless pursuit of profit led to one of the bloodiest labor confrontations in American history, a chilling reminder of the extreme lengths that powerful industrialists of the Gilded Age were willing to go to maintain their empires and profits. Imagine the scene. It's the summer of 1892, and tensions are simmering at the Homestead Steel Works in Homestead, Pennsylvania. This steel mill, owned by Carnegie Steel Company, was one of the largest and most productive in the country, a cornerstone of Carnegie's industrial empire. But behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. The men who worked in the mill endured exhausting 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week, in conditions that were grueling, filthy, and often life-threatening. For these men, there were no weekends, no vacations, no health care, and no safety protections, just back-breaking labor for wages that barely covered their needs. And at the top of this pyramid of suffering sat Andrew Carnegie, living in luxury while his workers toiled away in near slavery. The turning point came when Carnegie decided it was time to cut costs further. Despite his immense fortune, he wanted to reduce wages at Homestead and break the power of the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, one of the first powerful unions in the country. The union was the only source of protection these workers had, fighting for fair wages and reasonable hours. But Carnegie saw it as an obstacle to profit, so he left for a luxurious retreat in Scotland, leaving the dirty work to his partner, Henry Clay Frick, a man with a reputation for ruthlessness that even Carnegie admired. Frick had one mission: to break the union at all costs. Frick's approach was as cold-blooded as it was calculating. He immediately began cutting wages, which triggered outrage among the workers. But he didn't stop there. He ordered the construction of a massive, fortified fence around the mill, topped with barbed wire and equipped with watchtowers. This wasn't just a workplace. It was beginning to resemble a prison camp. The workers could see what was coming, and they were ready to stand their ground. Tensions were reaching a fever pitch, and the stage was set for a confrontation unlike any the United States had ever seen. When the workers refused to accept the pay cuts, Frick's response was swift and brutal. On June 29, 1892, he locked out the workers and barred them from entering the mill. But he hadn't planned on the workers' determination. They occupied the plant, standing guard to prevent anyone from breaking the strike. This was their livelihood, and they were prepared to defend it with their lives. Frick, however, was determined to regain control of the mill, no matter the cost. In the early hours of July 6th, he took an unprecedented step, hiring 300 armed Pinkerton detectives to retake the plant by force. The Pinkertons were notorious for their brutality, a private army available to the highest bidder. As they approached the mill by barge on the Monongahela River, they were met by a large crowd of workers and their families. The workers had armed themselves with whatever they could find: clubs, rocks, and even dynamite. What followed was a violent battle that lasted for hours. Shots were fired and both sides suffered casualties. The Pinkertons, despite their guns and numbers, found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer determination of the workers. The scene was chaotic, bloody, and horrifying, a true battle between labor and capital. Despite the initial victory of driving the Pinkertons away, the triumph was short-lived. Frick was undeterred and turned to the state for support. He pressured Pennsylvania's governor to call in the state militia, thousands of armed soldiers, to crush the strike once and for all. On July 12th, the militia marched into Homestead, armed with rifles and bayonets, and surrounded the mill. The workers, realizing they couldn't match the military force, reluctantly allowed the soldiers to occupy the plant. Under this military occupation, Carnegie Steel brought in non-union labor, effectively breaking the strike. The plant was back in operation, but the community was shattered. The Homestead Strike ended in defeat for the workers, but the scars ran deep. Families had lost fathers, sons, and brothers, and the sense of betrayal was profound. Carnegie, who had built his public image as a philanthropist and man of the people, was now widely regarded as a hypocrite. While he had been away in Scotland, professing to love his workers and the American dream, his partner had unleashed military force on the very people who made his fortune. The public outcry was fierce, but for Carnegie and Frick, it was just the cost of doing business. They had preserved their empire and profits, even if it meant trampling on lives. After the strike, conditions for the workers only worsened. Frick and Carnegie instituted even harsher policies to ensure no further uprisings. Work hours remained excruciatingly long, and safety conditions continued to be neglected. The company even blacklisted union leaders, ensuring they would never find work in the steel industry again. This was not just a defeat for Homestead's workers. It was a chilling message to laborers across the country. Challenging industrial power could be met with deadly force, and the wealthy held all the cards. As the years went on, Carnegie tried to salvage his reputation through philanthropy, donating millions to build libraries, schools, and institutions. But for many, these charitable efforts couldn't erase the bloodshed of Homestead. His so-called gospel of wealth philosophy argued that the rich had a moral obligation to give back. But his actions at Homestead told a different story, a story of wealth built on the backs of the exploited, of promises broken, and of lives sacrificed for profit. The Homestead Strike remains a landmark in American labor history, a powerful reminder of the harsh realities of unchecked capitalism, Carnegie's ruthless exploitation, and willingness to use violence to maintain control exemplify the lengths that powerful men were willing to go to protect their wealth. The events of 1892 showed that when the interests of the wealthy are threatened, they are often willing to abandon any pretense of morality. It was an era that championed wealth over humanity, where workers were little more than disposable parts in the vast machinery of industrial profit. In reflecting on Carnegie's legacy, one must grapple with the contradictory nature of his life. He was both a philanthropist and an exploiter, a man who claimed to champion the common good, but whose empire was built on the suffering of countless workers. His story is a complex one, but it serves as a stark warning about the dangers of extreme wealth and the corruption that often follows it. For the men and women of Homestead, Carnegie's fortune came at an incalculable cost.